watch the US Open match between Carlos Alcaraz and Stefanos Tsitsipas? If you have not, go ahead, Google it, watch it. Fantastic match, which showcased the young Spaniard's biggest weapon, his forehand. And that's what I'm going to dissect today. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I think there's two components that are very, very accessible for everyone who's not a world-class player. Now, there's one more thing that sets Alcaraz apart from even his world-class peers. And me as a former world-class pro and 19 times Grand Slam competitor, I could only dream of what this young guy has. If you want to find out what that is, watch the clip all the way to the end. But before that, it would be amazing if you could subscribe, click that little bell sign, and maybe recommend my channel to one or more of your tennis friends. So let's get going with the Carlos Alcaraz forehand. Carlos Alcaraz forehand is a huge weapon, and he's mainly using two sources of power. And I think those are absolutely accessible for all of us. So let's run through them here. Starting with the grip though, and this is something in many discussions we're hearing that the next gen players, or what is Alcaraz and Musetti and Holger Rune, are they next gen generation? They're 17, 18, 19 years old, so younger than Daniil Medvedev and Tsitsipas and Casper Ruud. So he actually has a semi-Western, so he's not very far over. Almost looks to me, for such a young guy who can create that much spin, quote unquote, a conservative grip. And he actually shares that grip with the other Spaniard, Rafa Nadal, of course, who also can create monster spin. And they're both using these two sources of power very similarly. So we got the grip. Now I want you to start paying attention to the offhand. So the racket just lightly rests in the offhand, and it's really the offhand here that initiates that turn. So you see how that left hand lifts and turns and brings the entire right side back, all the way back here. And of course, that is the action that will lead to the reaction, that immense uncoiling of the entire body. But the left hand really stays past the midline. So as his hands separate, see that here? His left arm stays past the midline a long time. And I think that is really something that we can all do. That should not be limited to just world-class players. And the next thing that we're seeing then is the racket head is above the wrist. It's, to my mind, a really compact swing. It drops down. And this is one thing that I pretty much leave alone with any of my clients. I do not dictate where the racket face is looking. So let's look at the next one where the entire racket face is in the frame. So on the take back here, as the left hand still helps with the turn, the racket face looks to us. But as opposed to, for instance, Alexander Zverev and a couple of the other guys that are younger, his racket face only looks completely down about here. When you look at a Alexander Zverev forehand, for instance, that racket face stays down a lot longer as he comes forward and up to contact. So that is something that, to my mind, very much is style and also a function of the grip. The grip always dictates the swing, or what shape that swing takes, and where the contact point is. And for Carlos Alcaraz, he's got about a 45, I want to say, degree here with the racket face. So again, very individual to my mind. He gets perfectly into the lock-in position, and I'm stealing that shamelessly with permission from Dr. Mark Kovacs, who has created this terminology. This concludes the preparation, and this is a really crucial thing that I believe we can all also try to work on. And I just made a other video about the forehand where I explain what that lag here is and how you get into that position. So check it out after you watch this video. Now let's look at the second source of power. And this is where I'm actually happy that for once I paid attention in physics. This is a third class lever, a level of third class. It's not what we call it in German, but in English, I believe that's what it is. So the longer a lever is, the faster you can move the weight, the resistance. And as a pivot point, we have the shoulder here. And by straightening that arm out, he can move that racket very, very fast. So let's look at those two forehands in real speed. It's just really, really fast how he pulls through and up to that contact point. So now that we're looking at the extension here, seeing how he's dropping the racket head under the ball, right here, and then pulling up to contact point. And if I can catch the contact point here, don't have enough frames, but you do see that the arm here is also fully extended, and that's just the swing shape that the grip demands. And then the extension goes all the way right here, elbow breaks now. And he finishes far away from his face and over his left shoulder. So the swing phase here, that is really great extension. And you do see, of course, that he does have this angular movement as well. That is so much characteristics for this part here, the loading right here, and then the firing of the leg and the hip right there. See here how he's driving into the ball in a semi-open stance, but then really rotates into, shoulder comes around, hip comes around, and then the arm comes around. But angular movement or not, meaning a more rounder movement around an axis, you can still extend through the ball and give that ball a lot of love with the racket, as one of my coaches used to say. And you will see that Carlos Alcaraz can do a lot of different things with his forehand. So for instance, these two here, I'm feeling are pretty flat, and I'm making air quotations because none of these guys really hits very flat. They all have a huge amount of spin on. But you see in this forehand here that he's actually doing a little bit of a Nadal. So he's adding a little bit more spin and finishes with that buggy whip, because I'm thinking that ball is probably a little heavier that he's getting, and he just has to play from this further back court position with a higher outgoing angle to just give it enough net clearance and depth to push his opponent, or hitting partner in this case, they're not playing points, back and getting depth on that ball. So that also lays to rest a little bit of that myth that you always have to finish in the same way. It really depends on what you're trying to do with the ball and what the incoming ball does. The other thing that I really, really like, in addition to his technique, is that he's just covering so much court with his forehand. All the guys do that, but I think he is exceptional. And I just want to show you an example of how quick and how dynamic this guy is to get his forehand. So let's take a look at it. I want to share this point with you here because this is pure athletic genius to my mind. So I'm just going to let it run real life speed almost. And then we're going to break it down here a little bit. So he's playing a point out here against Andrei Rublev, who definitely is not a bad server. Maybe not the best body serve of all times, but still good enough to push Carlos Alcaraz off, basically. But look at this here. He's lifting up to make contact with the ball. And as he's striking the ball. He's already gaining his balance back and seeing here where that ball is going to land. This ball is not over the net yet. I'm thinking at this point is probably somewhere around here. He'll see that Andre has to actually change from a two-hander into a one-hander to make contact with that ball. And that says to this guy here that no matter where that ball is going to land, he's going to want his forehand. And now look at the sequence of his steps. So this is one regular shuffle, and then it's going to be a huge crossover, second front crossover, starting to already turn. Again, the offhand, the left hand, we can't see that because his body is in the way, is helping to facilitate that. A back crossover, back pedal, and the coil. So again, offhand here actually separated earlier, but still stays past midline. And then he's going to let that racket drop. And again, that long lever there, going back behind Rublev to earn a shorter ball that he'll attack, and that gives him the point. So just athletically, really, really amazing what this young guy is already doing.